Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the day 3 of our free week in software quality assurance testing offered by the Skillwheel Academy. So far, we have done a great job together, and the audience have been so interactive. I'm happy about that. We have learned testing, right? We have learned about testing fundamentals, what software testing is. We talked about requirements and why it is so important to verify the requirements, to learn the requirements first before you jump into testing the product. And yesterday, we looked into the concept of bugs, defects, issues, and glitches, and so on, right? We discussed the bug life cycle, how defects or issues move from QA to developers and go back and forth between those two different teams and roles until it gets fixed and closed. Today, we're going to look into a very important topic, that is SQL, sometimes also referred to as SQL. Either way, it's correct pronunciation. You can say SQL or SQL. We will talk about databases. We'll talk about tables. More importantly, the data itself. And we will start writing SQL queries. So I'll show you how to write very basic, simple queries. And you know what's coming tomorrow and the day after tomorrow. So tomorrow we'll look into Python, and we will write our first lines of code in Python. And the day 5, we will do a demo of a test automation, right? We'll talk about test automation on day 5 for sure. All right, so let's get started. Some of the questions that we're going to answer today are that what the database is, right? And we'll also explore what the table is, how to select data, how to select information or records from the tables. That's what we're going to learn, how to select data. And you'll be surprised actually to find out that SQL, writing a query or writing a line of code in SQL is like simple English, but with some rules, of course. You know, I mean, every language has syntax rules, right? So you cannot just put any word in any order and it wouldn't make sense, right? So even in English, you have specific orders of the words that you have to put so that people understand you. So just like that, there are specific rules, orders, patterns that you have to follow, and you're good to go, basically. We'll also learn how to filter data, and I'll also show you the comparison with Microsoft Excel spreadsheets too. By the way, Microsoft Excel skills are also very important. So in corporate world, Microsoft Excel spreadsheets are used frequently. Apart from that, we'll also learn how to order data, Okay, all right. So first things first, before we dive into SQL or the concept of data, we need to understand the application architecture. Okay, so the software architecture. So software has layers. Okay, every application, every software has specific layers. To be more specific, 3 different layers. When you use any user interface based application such as a Facebook or Instagram or let's say Telegram, you are interacting as a user, you are interacting with the presentation layer. you're interacting, what you're looking at is the presentation layer. It's like a presentation for you, right? It's colorful, there are buttons there are input boxes there are fields that you can put in some data information, maybe your username and password, and then you can click. So basically you can interact, right? Mobile application, same way. You can scroll through and you can tap on your mobile phone, and what that particular layer that you're interacting with is called presentation layer. That's a colorful layer that's prepared specifically to the users so that it's easy to use. What's behind the presentation layer is application layer. Okay, so sometimes also referred to as a business logic layer. So what's in that application layer is the main core logic or decision-making process of the application, right? If the application has functionalities to send a payment from one user to another user, that logic is implemented using a specific programming language such as Python or C# in that application layer. And who develops all those layers? Pretty much not us, not the QA testers, but developers, right? Every layer that you're looking into here are developed. Every line of code is written by the developers, not the testers. So what's behind the application layer, or basically the last backend layer, is the data layer. It's a data layer. So take a look at this icon or symbol. You might have seen this before, right? This particular icon, it's usually used to refer to a storage that keeps information, that keeps data. So data layer of the application is here to store, to keep all the data, all the data of the application. So you can say data or you can say data. So each of them is a correct way of referring to information. So that's a data layer. Okay, and what you're seeing here, this icon, the symbol, represents the database. It represents the database. That's the next thing that we're going to talk about now. Okay, so before we do that, let's review this front end and then back end, so that we understand the presentation layer and then the data layer one more time. Okay, so here's a fun looking picture to you so that you can memorize again what is the front end and what is the back end. Okay, and how this is related to the presentation layer and to the data layer. So presentation layer, or UI, or user interface, is also known as the front end. Okay, so that's a front end. The other day when we were testing the application, putting in our username and login, right? And then we tried to see the about page, and then we got this error message and all that. We were interacting with the presentation layer. We were looking into the user interface, also referred to as a UI or GUI, graphical user interface. So that's a front end. That's a front end. That's a first layer, basically. And what we're going to look into today is a data layer, which is also known as the backend, right? Which is not seen to the users, right? If you just look at the application as a regular user, you don't see that backend. You don't see that layer of the application, right? Because that layer of the application is in databases. So that's the next concept that we're going to talk about. Okay, So what is a database? So that's question to you. All right. So you go ahead and feel free to put in the chat. That's okay. So just using your own words. What is a database? Let's hear from you. Okay. So in simple terms, what do you understand when we say a database? Okay, so it's a storage. That is right. It's a storage. It is a place where information is stored. It is a collection of information stored in one place. All right, information storage, collection of information. So thank you, guys. Those are really nice comments, and I like how the audience is as interactive as from the beginning. All right, yeah. So good answers. Now, database. Let's run some comparison here, right? So database is like a warehouse, is like a garage or a room or a house where you have cabinets, you have a bunch of cabinets, shelves where you can put information, right? So database is like a warehouse with cabinets, and those cabinets can be used to store and manage the application data. Okay, so it's a storage. That's right. As you guys put it correctly, it's a centralized location where you can put a lot of data and then keep all the information in there, right? So, and usually this particular symbol is used to represent the database. So what we have inside the database are the tables, right? So as I said, like cabinets, right? If the database is like a warehouse and the tables are like cabinets inside the warehouse, okay? So there can be many databases, and in each database there can be many tables, right? So each table will be here to store a specific type of data. Okay, so this is clear, right? So we're kind of clear on that. So we know that the data is stored in the database, right? When we talk about data layer, we're talking about databases, and the whole idea is to store information. Data means information, right? Idea is to store the information, and we have tables within the databases. Okay, so let's talk about tables now. Let's talk about tables. So what is a table? Table is like an Excel spreadsheet, right? So table is like an Excel spreadsheet. I'm sure every participant here have used Microsoft Excel or Google Sheets or any other spreadsheet at some point in time. And you know that table contains columns and rows, right? So you have the rows, row number 1, row number 2, and so on. Those are records, right? We also refer to them as records. And you have the columns. So for every column, you can have a column name or some indicator about the column, right? If it's a Microsoft Excel, then you would have this A, B, C, and so on, right? For each column name. But in database tables, normally you would have, for every column, you would have a column name. As you can see, this table, so look closely into this table. What kind of data this table contains? What kind of data? What do you think can be the name of this table? Think about it. So you can put your answer in the chat. What name would you give to this table, right? How would you name this table based on the data? Employee table, yep, employee information. That is correct, guys. That's correct. So as you can see, we see employee information here, right? So employee ID. So every person has an ID. Whenever you hear the word ID, right? Employee ID or job ID, think of it as a unique number that is here to quickly find, to quickly identify the record, the information, right? Because if you look at the first name, let's say Stephen King, right? Stephen first name, King last name. What are the chances that I might have another Stephen King in the same organization? We might have, right? So, there are chances that we might have the same first name, same last name in the organization. So next time you want to search for Stephen King, you could, and it might actually give you two records. So you want to have some sort of distinction between the records. So therefore, this kind of ID column is used, right? So think about your social security number or your passport number, for example. That's unique to every person. That is unique to every person, right? Across the United States, there would not be any duplicate social security number. No way. Right? So that is like an ID of every person, kind of. All right. So, and also let's talk about the data types too, right? So if you look at the data here, what data types we have here? What data types? What does data type mean? Any ideas? Anyone knows what data type means? When we say data type or type of the data or category of data. For example, employee ID, what kind of data is this? Yeah, it's a number, right? And correct, data types can be text, it can be number, it can be a date, right? So the first column here is employee ID. What data type does this column contain? It is an integer. It's an integer, right? Do you guys understand what integer is from algebra or from math, right? What's the difference between integer and any other numeric data type? What makes integer different from other numeric data types? Anyone? Why do we call it integer? Okay, yes, it is numeric and it's sequential. Yeah. So most important thing about integer is that it's a whole number. Integers are whole numbers, right? So, and there's also decimal point numbers, right? Let's take a look at the salary here. Salary is usually not an integer. It's a decimal point number, right? So that is the data type. Now we're talking about data types here, guys. Type of data. So the employee ID here is an integer. So it's not going to be 100.1 or 101.9, right? No. So because it really doesn't make sense. We just need the whole numbers starting from 1 to all the way up to the maximum number of employees that we have at that point in the organization. So as for the salary though, salary can have decimal points usually, right? So it can be like 24,000 point and 99 cents and so on. So there has to be some cents, some decimal points in the salary because it's money, right? It makes sense. There has to be some decimal points. So that's the data type. Job ID column. Let's take a look at the job ID column. That's an integer. How about the hire date? How about the hire date? If you look at the hire date, the data type of the hire date column is a date. It's a date. There's also another data type called date time, where you can see the time as well. right? It's a date and exact time, but this one is date. Okay. All right. So, but the first name and last name and email, as you can see, and also the phone number here, those are text. Those are text. Okay, so those are text. But in SQL, data types can be a bit different. I mean, we cover all the data types in most of the data types, I would say, that is relevant to QA testing during the bootcamp. So these data types are not you referred to as a text, but referred to as a varchar in SQL. So we'll cover that when time comes. Okay, so now, by now, we understand what the data layer is, what the database is, and what the table is, right? So the next step is, let's give a correct definition for SQL, because it's an abbreviation, right? SQL or SQL, it's an abbreviation. So each of these letters means something. So SQL stands for Structured Query Language. Let's pay attention. It's a query language. It's not a programming language. It's a query language. Okay. So, and why do we call this a query language? Because as a tester, most of the time, what you will be doing is querying information from the database. You will be asking for information from the database, and the database will give you the information that you are asking for. But you need to ask the right question. So you need to put that SQL query in the correct context and the correct syntax and so on. So you basically need to speak SQL, or you need to write a SQL query in order to get data from the database tables. Okay, so that is something that we're going to look into today. That is something that we'll start learning today together. Okay, so here's the first SQL query, or the concept that we're going to learn today, which is how to select data, how to select information from the database table. And the syntax here is very, very simple, sounds like English. Take a look at the first example right here in the left-hand side. So it says select star. You can read this as star. So select star from employees. What does that mean? It means that show me all the columns and rows from the employees table. That's it. Okay, so it basically means just give me all the information. Star here means all the columns. Okay, all the columns from that particular table. So employees here is the name of the table. Let's take a look. Okay, so that would be our next step. The tool that you're looking at right now is called SQL Server Management Studio. SQL Server Management Studio. Okay, and as part of the bootcamp, this tool will be installed in everyone's laptop or computer, and you will have access to the databases too. Okay, so let's take a look. Right here in the left-hand side, if you see, it says databases. So under the databases, it's like a folder, pretty much. It's like a container, right? There, we're expecting to see a bunch of databases, and you can see that each of those, and you might recognize this icon here that represents a database. You can see that there are a bunch of databases there, right? And today we'll be looking into the HR database, which stands for Human Resources Database, right? So we will expand this, and then you will see inside the Human Resource Database, what do we see here? Tables section. Tables. So just like we explained earlier, Inside the database, we have tables. We have a bunch of tables, right? So we have countries table, we have departments table, we have employees, jobs, regions, and so on. Employees table is the one that we're interested in. That particular table is the one that we want to look into as part of this session. So how do you select data from the table? As we mentioned here, we're using what we call as a select statement. Select statement. Okay, so let's create a select statement here. Select star from what? From, I'm just going to drag and drop it. It's right here, right? Or I could type that as well myself, right? I could say select star from employees, and that's it pretty much. Okay, so and then you will have this execute button right there. So you're going to go ahead and execute, or you can also press F5. So I'm going to execute, and bingo. So at the bottom right here, we have the data. We have the information. All that information is saved in this table. This table right here on the left-hand side, it is like a cabinet in your warehouse, right? So this is a very, very frequently used simple SQL query that QA testers use all the time to see the data, to see the information. If the information was stored in Microsoft Excel, to see the data, to see the information, you would just open it, right? Right. Just for comparison, you can see the same data in Microsoft Excel as well, right? For me, just to see all this data, I just have to open the Microsoft Excel. That's it. This is all I have to do, right? But in SQL, you have to run a query. You have to run a query. This is what we refer to as a query. We just wrote our first SQL query, the most simple SQL query, which is a select statement. Select star. Star stands for all the columns. Give me all the columns from, and then comes the name of the table, from employees table. And now you can see that you have all of the data information here right in front of you. If you want to see how many records you have, you can take a look at the bottom right here, and at the bottom on the right hand side, you can see that there are 40 rows, 40 records in this table at the moment. Okay, so let's go back to our example. So you can select a particular column as well. Select name or first name or last name from employees. So let's try to do that. What if I want to view only a particular column from this table, right? Not all the data. I'm just interested in let's say, all the first names, right? So I could do that. To do this, we'll start typing in first name right here. It gives me a hint. Select first name from employees. If I execute, now you can see that instead of displaying all the columns, it just gave me the first name column. First name column. Okay. Now, what if I want to see the first name and the last name column? Right? I want to see the first name and the last name. In that case, what you're going to use is logically comma, right? So we're going to go ahead and say first name, comma, and last name, and go ahead and execute query. Okay. All right. And you can keep doing that. For example, if I wanted to have their email as well, so I would look into the first name, last name, comma, and email from the employees. Okay, so let's pay attention to the syntax here, guys. Let's pay attention to the syntax closely. We have the select statement. This is the keyword. You see, and the SQL Server Management Studio highlights them specifically so that you don't get confused, so that you know exactly that this is the syntax or the keywords that belongs to SQL. As you can see, this is in blue, right? Select statement is in blue, or in the from is in blue, so that you can distinctively remember and use it correctly. So select, and don't forget the space, right? If you just remove the space, and then what you're gonna get is, first of all, it's just gonna highlight, and then if you execute, then you're going to get an error message. As QA testers, it's very crucial that you understand how to work with the error messages as well. Okay, so if you run into an error message, what do you have to do? You need to read the error message. So you need to pay attention to the error message. Usually it's error message was as informative as possible. It will try to help you to solve the issue in your code, in your query. So as you can see, it's trying to explain in line 2. In line 2, there's an incorrect syntax and near comma. So it's somewhere here. So pretty much it's trying to give you a hint. There's a syntax issue here. Okay, so we're gonna put it back. Same thing, but here after the comma, you don't have to put a space, but it's recommended just for readability, right? It would still work, but just for readability, try to separate the column names just like that. Okay, so what if I forgot to put the from here? Same way, you would get a bunch of error messages here. Okay. So you need to follow the specific syntax of the SQL. So the syntax here is that first you say select, and then the column names that are comma separated, right? Comma separated column names. So the column first, second column, or third column, in whichever order. I could change it if I wanted to see the first email and then, or if I first wanted to see the last name, let's say, right? So I can move it here. Let's make sure that you put a comma, last name, first name, and email, right? And if I execute, as you can see, now I can see the last name, first name, and email. Okay. All right. So we kind of know the syntax by now, right? We know how to select data or information from the database table. Let's also learn to give alias. What's an alias? So sometimes you may want to look at the or display the column with a different name. So for example, the email, you could give it a name, or you could rename that email column pretty much, right? You could rename it something like, we could say, instead of the email, we could say employee email. So we could say something like that. And if I execute, you can see that when it's displayed, instead of email, the column name now is employee email. Okay, so I just gave an alias. I did not change the actual column name in the table, right? Because we as QA testers, we do not change the structure of the table. When I say structure of the table, so take a look at the left-hand side one more time. So we're inside the HR database. I go to the employees table and I expand, and you will see the columns here. So if I expand the columns, and you will see the column names right? Inside the columns folder, you will see the column names. So right here, we have employee ID, and then the first name, last name, and email. As you can see, I still have the email as email, right? It did not change the employee email because this was just for display purposes. It's just for display purposes, just for as a result of the query. You can also see the data types here. If you pay attention, you can also see the data types. Remember, we talked about employee ID being an integer. So if you pay attention here, right here, it says integer, int, right? That stands for integer. And now if you look into the salary, the data type here is decimal. Data type for the salary is decimal. So let's select the salaries too, right? Instead of after the email, we can put the salary, and before the last name, we can put the ID too, right? Employee ID, and run. And you can see that employee ID right here. This is the integer, and the last one, which is the oh, actually, that's an interesting alias given there. So we're going to remove this alias and re-execute again. So you can see the salary here is decimal. Okay. All right. So by now we have learned how to select data from the database table. Next step would be how to select distinctively, how to select distinct data. So sometimes you look at the column and you want to see only the distinct values in that column. And so there could be some repetitive values, and you want to see only the distinct values in that column. For example, we may want to see the distinct first names. So they could be two Georges or two Annas or two Steves, right? So we want to avoid those duplicates and want to see only distinct first names. And the syntax or the correct query for this would be to use the keyword distinct right after the select statement and right before the column name. Okay, right before the column name. It actually makes sense, makes a lot of sense, and it's logical. So as you start using SQL, it's going to make a lot of sense and you will just get used to it. You just need more practice. So let's go ahead and try to select distinctively. Try to select distinctively. So first, as usual, let's select the first name from employees. If we select the first name from employees, you will see how many first names we have, how many records we have. In total, we have 40 records, right? We have 40 employees in the organization. But now I want to see only the distinct first names, only the distinct unique first names in the organization. Let's rerun, and you can see that it looks like we have 37. We have 37 unique names. Okay, so there are some names that were actually being repeated. So there were some employees with the same first name, basically. Right, so same thing we can do if we just select the last name. If we just select the last name, yes, we have 40 last names here. We have 40 last names. And let's see if any of those repeats. In that case, we need to check the distinct last names. Let's run. Oh, looks like we have distinct last name. So everyone has a distinct last name. There's no two employees which has the same last name in the organization. Okay, so that's a way that you can use distinct. So let's select all the records, all the columns from the employees table one more time. And to do this, don't forget the syntax would be select star from employees, Okay, select star from employees. Now, let's take a look at the distinct department IDs. That would be interesting, right? So we'll go ahead and then check. Select distinct department ID. So it looks like we have 11 departments, right? Every department has its ID, and uniquely we have 11 departments in this table. But if I just remove the distinct, you can see that it's gonna return 40 records, right? All the 40 rows will be returned. Because if you don't use the distinct, it's just gonna return all the records. If you use distinct, then it will only return the unique records from this column. Unique records from this column, removing all the duplicates. It's not really removing, like literally removing from the table. The table is still there, the data is still there with all the duplicates, but it's just giving you as for display purposes, right? So that you can just look at the result. By the way, what you're looking at here is called as a result set. It's a result set. Okay. All right. So let's take a look at the table one more time. Select star from the employees, and we can also check the unique job IDs, right? Unique job IDs. So if we select all the job IDs, there will be 40. But if we select them uniquely, then you will see that looks like we have 19 unique job positions in the organization. We have 19 unique job positions in the organization. Okay, so that's what distinct does. And it's a very useful keyword that is also frequently used by the QA testers on a daily basis. Okay, so that's the purpose of the distinct, to select information uniquely from the database tables. Let's move on. Can we also filter the records? What if I don't want to see all the records, but I want to see only the employees whose name is John, right? Or only the employees who were hired on a specific date. So if you look at the example in the left-hand side right here, right? So we're looking for the employee whose name is John. And the syntax is, again, very much English-like, right? English language all the way. Select star. Star basically means all the columns. From what? From employees table. Which record? Or do you want to apply any filters? Where name, or first name, is equal to John, or last name is equal to Johnson. So let's try to do that actually. So let's try to do that first. Again, we're gonna write our simple query first. Select star from employees, right? So that would be like select everything first. And if you want to apply any filters, go to the next line. It's just so that it's more readable. And you can type in where first name is equal to, and we're going to go with David. Okay. Remember, if I just put the David like this, it's not going to work. Okay, so we're going to get an error message right here. So it says invalid column name, David. What data type David is? Let me know. What data type the David or the first name is? We just talked about it earlier. What data type does this column contain? It contains text, correct. It contains a varchar or text, and whenever it's a text, right? Whenever it's a text data type, make sure you surround it with the single quotes. Surround it with single quotes, okay? At the beginning and at the end, it means that it's a text. Now we can run it, and as you can see, it returned one record, just one record, right? That particular record, we got that particular record. Again, let's repeat that one more time. Select all the records, not all the records, all the columns, right? Star stands for columns. Select all the columns from employees table where the first name is David. So where first name equals David. I could, instead of the star now, I could select a particular column as well. So I could say, okay, I want to get the first name, and I also want to check this employee's hire date. Okay, and the department ID as well. Okay, so if I run this, now as you can see, I have decreased number of columns that are displayed, and I only return, I'm only looking at 3 columns that I wanted to see: first name, hire date, and department ID. Okay, so it will give, SQL is here to give you flexibility to manage the data, to manage the information in the database, so you can get whatever you want in whichever format you want. Okay, so the better you are at SQL, the better you are at communicating with the databases. All right. Okay. So now going back to our second example. Select star from employees where hire date is 1993-01-13. So let's try that too. So now we want to select all the employees which were hired in a particular on a particular day, basically, right? So I'll remove this and first select everything and take a look which date we want to use. So we'll go ahead and use, let's say, this particular date, right? So we'll say select star from employees and where column name, hire date, is equal to that date. Remember, date also has to be surrounded by the single quotes. Okay, otherwise it won't work. So we'll go ahead and run this query. Do you see that? It returned 4 records with information about 4 employees, and all 4 were hired on the same day. So 1994, June 7th, we had Susan and we had Herman, Shelley, and William hired by the organization on the same day. Okay, that's a very powerful tool that we have here, which is the SQL query language and the SQL Server Management Studio that we're using today. Okay, let's move on. So we know how to filter the records as well, right? So we know how to select, we know how to select distinctly, and we also know how to filter the records. So select particular record, right? Can we order the records, displayed records, right? We have a bunch of records. Can we order them as well? Yes, we can. And again, it's a very simple keyword, order by. Give me all the employees, but I want to see them in a specific order. Order by salary. Or in the second example, order by hire date. Right? So let's look into this. Let's try to do that together. So again, we're gonna first go ahead and select all the records from the employees table. And pay attention to the salary column, for example. Salary column would, it's not really ordered, right? So you have the 24,000 and then 9,000 here, but then again you have 11,000, so it's not really ordered. So let's try to order. To order this, you will use the keyword order by what? By salary. Order by salary. And run your query. So when you do this, when you run a query using an order by keyword, that particular column will be ordered from minimum to maximum. From minimum to maximum if it's a numeric field. As you can see, it started from the minimum salary and it went all the way up to the highest salary. Okay, all the way to the highest salary. Now, obviously we have a question. So can I also flip this order, right? Can I order by maximum so that it actually returns first the maximum salary and then goes starts decreasing? Yes, you can. To do this, you have to add another keyword called descending, right? You don't write the whole thing, but you just have to put in DESC, which stands for descending. So now if I execute this one more time, now this time you can see that salary now starts with the highest salary, right? Now we have the 24,000 and then 18,000, 17, and so on. Right? So that's the way it works. If you skip it, if you skip the descending, then it would do it by default. It would order it from minimum value to the maximum value. But if you want to do it other way, if you want to start from the maximum value, then add the keyword descending and rerun, and you can see that now we have the maximum salary listed as a first record. Let's do the second example. So this time we're looking into the hire date. Right now I want to look at the records. I want to look at all the records, but I want to see who was hired first, right? Who was the first employee in the organization, right? That would be an interesting type of data to look at. Okay, so right here, as you can see, we have all the employees, but right now it's not really ordered. And what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead. So just to confirm that it's not ordered, so you can see that we have 1997 here, we have 1998 and 1996, so it's not ordered. So we'll go ahead and then order it using the keyword order by hire date. Order by hire date, and then execute. Now you can see, take a look at the hire date column right here. You can see the first employee was hired in 1987, right? And then it starts going up, and then you have all the way up to the 2000s, right? All the way up to the 2000. So from the earliest date to the recent date. This is how the date is ordered when you order by date. But what if I want to see the other way around? I want to see who was, in such order that I first see the recent employees and then goes all the way to the history, the oldest employees, right? To do that, again, you simply have to add the keyword descending. And just pay attention. Right now we have 1987 here. We're going to execute, and you can see that it just flipped. Right now we're looking at the Charles Johnson, who was employed on 2000 and January 4th. And if you look at the dates, it starts going back to the history, right? From the recent to the earliest. Right, so that's a way you order the records. All right, so let's take a look let's take a look some of the basic keywords in SQL. Okay, so far we have covered the select statement. So what is the purpose of the select statement? The purpose of the select statement is to retrieve the records, is to get the records, right? To look at the records, to view the records. That's the purpose of the select statement. Second, select distinct. The purpose of the select distinct is to get the unique records, to retrieve, to obtain the unique records. Order by. So what is the purpose of the order by? Order by is here to order the result that you're getting, right? You get there some result from your select statement. Now you want to order it, and that's when you need to order by. Where clause or where keyword is here to filter. Where keyword is here to filter the records for you. Okay. There's another interesting keyword, which is like keyword. And like keyword is here to search for a pattern. How can you search for a pattern? Let's take a look. So we're going to get all the records from employees table again, but this time I'm going to look for all the employees where the first name starts with, let's say, L, right? Starts with L. So that is the syntax to do this. So we'll say where first name like, and instead of putting the whole complete name, you put the first letter or part of it, and for the rest, you're going to put percentage sign. That basically means I don't know the rest of it, but I'm just looking for all the first names that starts with L, right? So we can start with D and see how many employees we have whose first name starts with D, right? We have David, Diana, Daniel, and Dan. What if I want to say D and A, right? The first letter is D, second letter is A, and now you can see I'm looking at two records here, David and Daniel, right? And you could do the same thing on the other way. So you could say, I don't know how it begins, but it's ending in L, right? So this way you have Daniel, Ismail, and Emmanuel, Michael. All of those first names are ending with L, as you can see, right? Or if it's ending with EL, you can see that too, right? You can check that too. So that is the power of the like keyword. So it helps you to search for a pattern or filter the record by a pattern, by a partial search, right? By a partial match, basically. You can also use the mathematical operations such as equal, greater, equal. You already saw equal, greater sign, less than sign, greater than or equal, and so on, right? So those things that we can use as well. So let's go ahead and select all the employees one more time, but this time we'll say okay, so I want to look at the salaries, employees where the salary is more than 10,000, for example, right? So we have 9 employees whose salary is more than 10,000. I could do less than 5,000, and then see we have 12 employees whose salary is less than 5,000, right? So we could do less than or equal to 2,500, and you can see that that was only one, or 5 5,500, and you can see that too, right? So you can use all the comparison operators, and it works just fine. You can also use the in operator and between operators, in and between operators. Here's how it works. So we could say where the salary is between, that's another keyword, right? The salary is between 5,000 and 6,000. Let's see if we have any employees whose salary is between 5,000 and 6,000. We could increase it to 8,000 to get more records. Here we go. So those are the salaries which are between 5,000 and 8,000. That's inclusive of the borders, inclusive of the 5,000 and 8,000 here. And you can also use the in operator, where the first name, let's say in, first name in Lex and John. So we're looking for Lex and John, right? This way it would actually return the Lex, and looks like we have two Johns here. Okay, so it returned any records with the first name of Lex and John. So that's how the in operator uses. And in, by the way, is also a keyword in Python. So that's something that we're going to cover as part of the bootcamp as well. Okay, so far you have been introduced to the fundamentals of data layer, in the applications, and you learned how to speak SQL, how to write simple queries in SQL to get data, to get information from the database tables. So that brings us to another, or one of the final concepts that we need to cover today, which is ETL, right? So what does ETL stand for? ETL stands for extract, transform, and load, right? It's a bit advanced concept that will be covered. It is one of the specializations as we mentioned. So it's a process of moving information or data from one place to another place. If you look at this particular, if you look at this particular diagram or the workflow here, so we have the source systems, let's say a bunch of smaller databases, and millions of records and tables there, and that information is extracted, transformed, and loaded to data warehouses. And these days, many organizations are actually moving their data into clouds, right? It's called as a cloud migration. Most of the organizations, the cloud idea of cloud, or the cloud related skills are highly in demand these days. So, and because the organizations are moving their data into cloud, they are looking for specialists, testers who can perform such validation, who can check, who can act as a tester for the project where the data is moving from one place to another place, especially from the company's own network or own data storage into the cloud technologies such as AWS, as an example. All right, so that's what the ETL stands for, basically. With all that being said, why study SQL? Why QA testers need to learn SQL? The answer is, even for the manual positions, even for the junior manual positions, SQL is a must. SQL is an important part of being a tester. Okay, so SQL is a skill set that you need to have, that you need to learn in order to become a complete full stack QA tester. So as you can see, those are the job positions from the actual market. For junior manual tester position, you can see the role requires QA with SQL skills, right? Strong SQL experience, and also database testing, hands-on SQL experience, and so on. Right? You will keep seeing those kind of keywords all the time in the in job positions. So keep that in mind. And there are so many resources available on the internet that are related to SQL. Work on them, watch those videos, rewatch the same recording that we will share, and then practice your SQL